Chapter 3: The Loading Dose. Arthur Vane did not believe in intuition. Intuition was just pattern recognition without the data logs to back it up. Arthur believed in metrics. He sat at his desk in the basement studio, the blue light of his monitors cutting through the gloom. It was 8 p.m. on Wednesday. On the screen, a fresh Excel spreadsheet was open. He had named the file protocol_alpha.xlsx. Column A, timestamp. Column B, dosage, mg. Column C, estimated plasma concentration. Column D, subjective pain level, 1 to 10. Column E, cognitive latency. He sat at his desk, the blue light of his monitors cutting through the gloom. He wasn't taking drugs, he told himself. He was overclocking the processor. He looked at the orange bottle. The label was explicit. Take 1 capsule by mouth at bedtime. Arthur typed 300 into column B for the morning slot. The previous day's experiment had been conclusive. The 10:22 a.m. dose had not resulted in somnolence. It had resulted in optimization. The drowsiness Dr. Kozlowski warned about was obviously a median side effect based on the average American physiology. Overweight, sedentary, metabolically sluggish. Arthur was 140 pounds of wire. His metabolism ran hot. The 300 milligrams dose he took at night was clearing his system too fast. By 2 p.m., the static in his leg was returning, and the sensory noise of the office was bleeding through the buffer. The solution was a loading dose. In pharmacology, this was the initial higher dose given to establish a rapid therapeutic level. Arthur decided his life required a permanent loading dose. Proposed regimen: 7 a.m., 300 milligrams, buffer against the commute/morning workflow. 4 p.m., 300 milligrams, buffer against the afternoon crash/pain spike. Total, 600 milligrams daily. He did the math on the cost. He would run out in 2 weeks. That was a future Arthur problem. Present Arthur had a logic gate to close. He picked up the bottle. He wasn't tired. He wasn't in excruciating pain at this exact second. But he knew the noise was waiting for him tomorrow. He wasn't taking drugs, he told himself as he saved the file. He was overclocking the processor. Thursday morning usually smelled like ozone and dread. Today it smelled like coffee. Arthur stood in the kitchenette of the office break room. It was 8:55 a.m. He had taken his first 300 milligrams dose at 7:15 a.m., right before leaving the apartment. The subway ride had been manageable. The screech of the brakes was still there, but it didn't feel like a dental drill in his molars anymore. It was just sound. Acoustic input, negligible priority. Miller walked in. The floor manager was wearing a puffer vest today, looking like he was ready to hike a mountain instead of managing a data entry team. Usually, Arthur would shrink into the corner, pretending to stir his coffee until Miller left. Social interaction with Miller was a minefield of potential insubordination charges. "Vane," Miller said, reaching for the sugar packets. "You get that script done?" Arthur turned. The gabapentin hum was humming in his chest, a low, warm frequency that made his limbs feel heavy and his tongue feel loose. "The delimiter script is live," Arthur said. His voice was steady. "I also took the liberty of indexing the client's legacy files. The retrieval speed is up 40%. Miller paused, a sugar packet halfway to his cup. He looked at Arthur. Really looked at him. Usually, Arthur's eyes darted around the room. Usually, Arthur radiated a vibration of "don't talk to me." Today, Arthur was holding eye contact. He was leaning back against the counter, relaxed. 40%? Miller asked. 42.5 actually, Arthur said and gave a small, easy shrug. But who's counting? Miller laughed. It was a short, barking sound, but it was a laugh. Arthur Vane had made a manager laugh. 42.5. Miller shook his head, grinning. You're a machine, Vane. Hey, keep this up and we might actually hit the Q3 incentives. I'll make sure the director knows who cleaned up the mess. Appreciated, Arthur said. Miller clapped him on the shoulder. Arthur braced for the pain, the sciatic jolt that usually followed physical contact. It didn't come. Or rather, it arrived as a dull thud, distant and uninteresting. The nerve fired, but the brain didn't scream. Miller walked out whistling. Arthur stood alone in the break room. He looked at his hands. They were steady. No tremors. No sweat. He felt a profound sense of validation. The world had always told him he was broken. Too sensitive. Too literal. Too intense. They had fired him for personality conflicts. They were wrong. He wasn't broken. He just had a chemical imbalance. And he had just corrected it. By 2 p.m., Arthur was flying. The open plan office was still a disaster of noise. Cheryl was scraping her yogurt cup again. The radiator was hissing. But Arthur was encased in amber. He was processing rows of data at a velocity he hadn't achieved since his 20s. The gabapentin didn't make him smarter. His raw IQ was a constant. But it removed the friction. It removed the micro-hesitations caused by anxiety, the second-guessing, the physical discomfort of sitting in a cheap chair. He was a superconductor. Zero resistance. At 3:45 p.m., he felt the first crack in the armor. A subtle cooling of the warmth in his chest. A slight return of the tightness in his jaw. The radiator has sharpened, becoming annoying again. Half-life decay, Arthur noted. Plasma concentration dropping below therapeutic threshold. He didn't panic. He had a plan. The open plan office was still a disaster of noise, but Arthur was encased in amber. He was a superconductor. Zero resistance. He opened his messenger bag and took out the bottle. He was discreet, shielding it with his body, but he didn't feel the shame he expected to feel. A diabetic doesn't feel shame for taking insulin. A mechanic doesn't feel shame for oiling an engine. He dry swallowed the second 300 milligrams capsule. He checked his spreadsheet. 1600 hours, dose 2 administered. He waited. 20 minutes later, the warmth returned. The annoyance with Cheryl evaporated. The pain in his leg, which had begun to whine, went silent. Arthur typed. He didn't take a lunch break. He didn't need it. He felt full. At 5 p.m., the lights in the office flickered as the automated system switched to evening mode. Miller walked by Arthur's desk. Go home, Arthur, Miller said, not unkindly. You've done enough for 2 days. He stepped out onto the street. The city was loud. He didn't know that the body is a greedy machine. 600 milligrams wouldn't be enough. Arthur saved his work. He packed his bag. He walked to the elevator with a fluid, easy stride. He stepped out onto the street. The city was loud sirens, traffic, shouting. Arthur took a deep breath. The air smelled of exhaust and garbage. But tonight, it didn't make him want to peel his skin off. It just smelled like the city. He walked toward the subway. He had successfully navigated a 12-hour day without a single moment of panic, pain, or social failure. He had hacked the system. He touched the bottle in his pocket. 600 milligrams, he thought. That is the magic number. He didn't know yet that magic numbers had a habit of changing. He didn't know that the body is a greedy machine, and that tomorrow or next week, 600 milligrams wouldn't be enough to keep the noise out. But for tonight, Arthur Vane was fixed.